Well, thanks so much, Joe, for joining me today. I truly appreciate it. And I'm really excited to kind of dive into a lot of what's going on in the world. And you've kind of seen it firsthand, sort of day to day, dealing with sort of philanthropy and giving back and crypto and kind of all the things that go along with this ever changing sort of world that we're in. But let's first, real quick, talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to crypto, how you got to Coinbase.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really nice to talk. Yeah. So my background is very much not in the nonprofit world. I like to say I'm a classically trained computer scientist. Started out as an engineer, did other things at a number of big companies for the first half of my career, and the second half was spent primarily as a bootstrapping entrepreneur. Started a couple of companies, one of which was modestly successful. We sold to Twitter. Another was very much not successful. But in the process of founding that, I was able to connect with Brian Armstrong through a mutual investor, Y Combinator, actually also an incubator.
Yep.
And as we were winding down the last company, I was sort of considering what was next. And at that time, Brian was starting up GiveCrypto, which is his charity at the time. Like many other people around that time frame, around 2017, 2018, had sort of fallen down the crypto rabbit hole. And it seemed like a very interesting and specifically what he was trying to do with the charity was a very interesting problem to solve. It didn't require much consideration or contemplation. It seemed like a wonderful next step.
What did you have to, like you said, you didn't come from sort of the nonprofit sort of world. So what was your initial kind of response and read on the sector in general when you kind of looked at it and kind of dove into it, and all of a sudden you're sort of in it day to day? Was there anything that jumped out to you that said, oh, this is going to work really well because there's so many ping points, and whether it's philanthropy, giving back, and just in general, the whole sector is behind when it comes to tech. So what kind of surprised you when you kind of just dove into the nonprofit sector initially?
I don't know if I totally agree with that. There clearly are some old stodgy nonprofits out there, just like there's some old stodgy for-profits.
Sure. Good point.
But many people I've met are actually really on it, and in some respects really on the bleeding edge, and both thinking about and doing very impressive things. My feeling though, and part of what got me excited about the opportunity was that it actually it doesn't feel much like a charity, or what I would have thought a charity would have felt like. Brian is obviously an entrepreneur. He wanted to run the startup or run the charity kind of like a startup, and I think that's why he chose somebody like myself, who's obviously got a lot more startup experience than charity experience. And we're a small team. It's myself and basically two software developers. Most of our work revolves around like any technology startup would, or like most technology startups, are around using software to get leverage and ultimately get scalability. So we just happen to be doing it in the towards the end of giving money away, not necessarily making money. But in many respects, it's very much like an early stage startup.
So when somebody asks you what GiveCrypto is, how do you explain it to them?
Yeah, I mean, I usually present it in the form of this philosophical battle. So the short answer is we try to help people in need by making direct crypto transfers. And I think that the best way to couch that is within the larger, like I said, philosophical debate around direct cash transfers. As you probably know very well, there's this interesting debate going on where traditional, some might say paternalistic charities feel that people who are in tough situations can't really be, I don't know if trust is the right word, but need to have some decisions made for them, let's say, in terms of what exactly they should be given. Is it sending them a piece of livestock like a cow or a pig? Is it building a school? Is it providing mosquito nets or what have you, all of which are very noble things to do for people. But there's a new and growing body of evidence to suggest that it's effective approach where no. The most effective way to help people is just by giving them money. They almost always spend it on something that is objectively good, and who knows their own needs better than the person themselves. So just give them money. In our case, we're giving them money in the form of cryptocurrency, which we believe also has some additional benefits in terms of onboarding these people into this new financial system that may position them much better for long-term financial independence.
So like in sort of the real world, right? Day-to-day individuals living in sort of certain areas, is it after sort of disasters? Is there a certain, I guess, sort of scenario that is sort of often used for this? And then I believe that the money is given into a fund, right? And then the fund at GiveCrypto allocates that based on what exactly, right? Like how does it
Yeah,
get
yeah, yeah. So
distributed?
you're asking how do we decide who to give money to?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean we're like any charity, we raise money from donors. That money is held in our treasury. And then the challenging and I think really interesting question is how do we decide who gets our money? And that's a really hard question to answer. The way other direct cash transfer charities do that is generally they hire teams of people to have boots on the ground in the places where they want to help, and these people do a lot of this targeting manually by like knocking on doors and doing
Mm-hmm.
follow-up spot checks and whatnot to make sure the money is being used, to see what it's being used for and what have you. Are as a technology organization, a tech startup, we want to try to use software for a lot of that. What we've started or what we've settled on is this model that we call the ambassador model.
Mm-hmm.
The idea behind this is that we find people who live in the communities where we want to help. We call ambassadors. They tell us, based on their local knowledge and local understanding, who in their community really is in need, and then we send cryptocurrency directly to the people that the ambassadors identify for us. The ambassadors also help with some, let's call it kind of tech support onboarding. It is a little tough to use this technology when at first. So the ambassador helps the recipient download a wallet, maybe make their first transfer and whatnot. But we've done this a lot, and we've tested different kind of levels of training and handholding, and it takes a lot less training than you'd think to get someone comfortable with the technology.
My other question would be when they actually do get it, right? Let's say you receive, $95 or whatever currency it is within their native country. How would they then like use it, right? Because then you can't just go to a store, right, and get food for your family or go
Yeah. I
buy
mean, that's
something. So what's sort of that hurdle right now that people face?
Yeah. Right now, that really is a challenge. We've done some previous programs where we've targeted very, very specific geographic areas, like a few square miles, and in those cases, a good chunk of our effort was around recruiting stores, places
Right.
where
Yeah.
they'll be willing to accept payment in the currency we happen to be using. Finding cash out partners, people on the ground who would convert the cryptocurrency into local fiat so they could spend it on whatever they needed. What we've noticed though is, I believe we're still very early days, so there isn't a vibrant ecosystem in most of the world, but there are a few services that provide peer-to-peer exchange. And what that means is there's another human being, usually in the same country or at least in the same region, willing to, in the case of trying to turn your crypto into cash, they are effectively buying your crypto from you and then giving you some form of fiat currency in exchange. And almost every country on the planet has some agents or some reps from these different P2P services. These are things like local Bitcoins or local cryptos. Basically, just it's almost like an eBay or a Craigslist for people
Gotcha.
buying and selling crypto. So that's how a lot of our recipients will convert their crypto into cash. But we've also seen some really interesting kind of emergent behavior where, again, when there's a certain amount of density in certain regions, people will just pay each other in the crypto we send them.
Right.
We've also seen when we have stores that accept payments in crypto, the stores end up holding on to a decent amount, and in some cases preferring to hold on to, especially in places like Venezuela and whatnot with hyperinflation, prefer to hold on to the crypto versus convert it into the local currency that's almost certainly going to be devalued. Additionally, we've seen some really encouraging, albeit small, but really encouraging examples where sometimes when the stores end up accumulating quite a bit of crypto, they're in a few cases they were able to actually pay their suppliers in crypto for more inventory, which is a really interesting example of kind of crypto working its way up the supply chain.
Interesting. And that's the next question I have is with stores and merchants, how difficult has that been, or has it not been that as difficult as you might have thought it was been to sort of get them on board with, taking it, right? That's the,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it was
biggest hurdle in all this. Once that happens, then it's game over, right?
For sure. It was less difficult than we thought. Again, this is in the programs right now. Our programs are worldwide, so there's less geographic density. So it's more difficult now. But in the programs when we were targeting a very specific area, it was a lot easier than you'd think. You'd basically we'd have someone on the ground, and it happened to be in Venezuela. Go and talk to the different stores and bodegas and say, we've got this program we're doing. We're sending people in the area a lot of money. Do you want to be one of the places where they can spend it? And more often than not, the store owner, who's an entrepreneur himself or herself, they get it pretty quickly, and they're like, yeah, actually we would be. And usually what happens is we would help them for their first few transactions, they would immediately convert it to local currency, and we would help them do that. Then what they'd start doing is start converting it themselves to local currency. But then once they saw they could do that kind of whenever they wanted, they start thinking, maybe I should hold on to this a little bit longer. And you see this interesting kind of evolution of attitudes towards this new asset, where they start out very skeptical and wanting to get out of it as possible, and then kind of almost become hodlers in their own right.
Have you worked, or you or your team worked with nonprofits, or is it all done via ambassadors, or does some conversations happen with actual sort of local nonprofits or even bigger nonprofits, maybe within sort of a similar space?
Yeah, we've had a bunch of conversations. This is sort of the topic du jour right now across all sorts of industries. The other nonprofits are looking into it pretty aggressively. We haven't done anything formal with any large nonprofits like name brand nonprofits.
Sure.
We have done a few one-off trials with much smaller organizations, and I think that's probably pretty normal for profits too. There's some sort of generic advice from just generally within startup land that very few partnerships between really small and really big companies bear fruit for both sides. Usually it's one or the other. Usually the big one that's benefiting more than the little one. They end up getting kind of overpowered. And I having talked to a number of larger ones, I get a similar feeling from there that there's just a big organization is almost a totally different beast from a small one. They have a different language, they have a different urgency, they have a different kind of cadence to them, and it's oftentimes very difficult for those two different beasts to get along and partner.
You had mentioned Venezuela, and obviously El Salvador is going through quite a transition as we speak right now. Is there other countries that you've seen sort of adopt it, maybe that people don't know about, or should maybe understand a bit more?
Well, I think adopt is a very loaded word. It could be argued no country has really adopted.
I meant not the country. I just meant the people, the population, the citizens.
So we thought long and hard about the right places to do this, because frankly, we're still very early, and we don't want to give crypto in a situation where it would be better just to give local fiat. Right. We don't want to use this technology just for the technology's sake. A lot of our early work, and even some of our work now, is based on the hypothesis that crypto has the highest likelihood to help in places where something fundamental is broken, like broken money with hyperinflation, like broken government, with which one really good and really sad example is refugee camps. So we've done a fair amount of work inside of refugee camps where there really isn't any rule of law. Right. And in some cases, currencies actually are forbidden by the people running the camps. We've also done some rather interesting, also rather heartbreaking work around with broken families, with victims of domestic abuse. And the idea there is that you can actually use crypto's sort of covert characteristic to give some resources to victims who are in active situations, in active abuse situations, where they oftentimes the abuser uses financial just as much as they use physical to the victim, and it's many times very difficult. If you're using traditional financial infrastructure, it's very difficult to get financial help to the victim. Crypto, on the other hand, we can send it right to their phone, and it's not undetectable, but it's much more difficult to detect, compared to like opening up a Bank of America account for somebody. And good old B of A, as they always do, as soon as you open up an account, they'll start sending you cross marketing and up marketing flyers, and that can raise some eyebrows if somebody's trying to monitor your activities.
I want to talk a little bit about maybe successes, right, or goals, or like what the mission might be if we look 3 to 5 years down the road. I know that's tough to do right now, but what does success look like?
We've got pretty ambitious plans. The hope is to be helping millions of people and increasing economic freedom, and we do. I know this still probably sounds a little bit crazy to people who aren't full believers of this new technology, but we think this does have life-changing, trajectory-changing implications, where if you can use this technology, you can circumvent traditional financial infrastructure that is, for most people on this planet, like at best ambivalent, and in many cases exploitative, whereas this new technology is it is just a protocol. There aren't any anyhow, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but yeah, I mean, we obviously we want to help in the form of sending resources to our recipients, but also we believe that getting them using the technology and comfortable with it will position them for great financial independence and more economic freedom in the medium to long term.
I know we touched on a couple of, and I'll sort of end here a little bit on some of maybe the successes that you've seen, or maybe stories that sort of you've seen. I know we kind of touched on a few different scenarios, but are there others that come to mind that show the power of this?
Yeah, I mean, there've been quite a few. One area that we've done some fairly high level so far because it's so new is in El Salvador, and specifically in this town of El Zonte, which was this fishing village where some credit the Bitcoin law, or some credit to the origin of the country's Bitcoin law. They've got about 3,000 people, 70% of which are either have a wallet on their own phone or have a phone in their household that has access to a wallet. And they've already seen some interesting behavior, sort of like the petri dish, if you will, of crypto native behavior. One is that so just if you've got a crypto wallet, you can either hold Bitcoin. In this case, that they use Bitcoin in El Salvador. You can use or you can hold US dollars, which El Salvador became a US dollar based country 20 years ago. And it's really interesting to see when someone decides to hold Bitcoin and when they decide to hold US dollars. And what they've seen is that as you sort of expect in hindsight or retrospectively, Bitcoin is sort of like a savings account or almost like an investment account. And for many of these people, it's the first time they've had a chance to invest in any sort of an asset. And then dollars are more like a checking account. So if you know you're gonna need the money in the foreseeable future, you sell the Bitcoin, hold dollars. If not, you hold it as Bitcoin, and I think to a certain extent they're hoping for, expecting some appreciation. Additionally, these are places where almost everybody's unbanked, and partially for that reason, there isn't great infrastructure, just because it's really hard to collect payment for that infrastructure. So one good example is internet service. There are internet service providers, obviously, in El Salvador. They generally focus on much like financial services, they focus on wealthier clients because that's where the money is. That's where you can make more money. But now that in this one particular town of El Zonte, just about everybody has access to a crypto wallet, the administrative overhead of running something like an ISP is quite a bit less, because you can charge, you can receive payment over Lightning. And there's this ISP that's currently installing infrastructure around Ozonte that's coming up with very creative billing mechanisms. Kind of like the way a pay as you go mobile phone operator would work, where you can buy a block of minutes, or you can buy a month of service or whatnot. They're doing something similar with home internet, where you can buy, I believe it's by the megabyte, by the day, by the week, by the month, and that's actually that's actually trivial to implement, because they can accept payments over Lightning for this, and you can kind of buy as much as you need, and then if you're going out of town to work in a neighboring city, or just frankly can't afford it for a few days, you can turn off the internet and then buy more when you are able to afford it. The technology opening up new ways for consumers to interact with businesses.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you it's all these ancillary things and benefits that come from just the core functionality. You never know what can happen. Last question real quick was, you said sort of like the debit and the savings and sort of, USD and BTC. Is there another cryptocurrency out there that is being used or being given, or is Bitcoin just king, or other sort of cryptocurrencies creeping into people's wallets, and you see maybe that being used a little bit more as well?
We're currency agnostic. We've used about half a dozen different currencies. We view them as protocols, as technologies. Much like there are certain times when it's better to use TCP, and other times it's better to use UDP for the transfer of data over the internet. We believe there are sometimes when it's better to use Bitcoin, sometimes better to use Ethereum, or even sometimes it's better to use a stable coin. We've used all of them in previous programs. The names are sort of the usual suspects. You'd expect almost, you probably just rank it by market cap and work your way down. So Bitcoin's probably number one, Ethereum's probably number two. Some form of stable coin, maybe above or below that, depending on the use case. But yeah, we really don't have an opinion on what coin's better than the other. But we're at the same time, I'm also quite empathetic to those that have more maximalist leanings with in their thinking.
Well, I appreciate it so much, Joe. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy, so I really appreciate you taking some time out your day to do this. Best of luck to you and the team in the future, and just keep building. And it's pretty amazing what this stuff can do. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really fun to talk.